Good morning. Good morning, Lakeview. How are we all doing today? And good morning to those out there watching on the stream. We are continuing our study of Genesis. We're on week 2, so we're going to be covering Genesis chapters 2 through chapters 5. So, most people are familiar by now with the Rubik's Cube. Suppose a blindfolded person were given a thoroughly scrambled Rubik's Cube. He makes one move of a cube face in each second. How long would it be before a solved cube were obtained? The answer is about 100 times longer than the age of the earth. And by the way, that is an atheist giving this quote, Fred Hoyle. So that is 4 billion years times 100 to solve the Rubik's Cube. So there are 10 to the 90th power of electrons in the universe. That's 10 with 90 zeros after it. Now, events, there are 10 to the 120 number of events since the universe was created, according to the atheist. So that is every time a subatomic particle interacts with another subatomic particle, there is like a billion events going on in your body at this very moment. The odds of a single protein being formed is 10 to the 195. That is 10 with 195 zeros. That is more zeros than there are events that have happened in the universe since its creation. And you need 40 proteins just to get things going. So that is the problem the atheists have with the creation of life. So today we're going to be covering Genesis chapter 2, verse 4b through chapter 5. So this is my bibliography again. This is the commentary I've been using by John Goodengay. It is a tad on the liberal side at times. He does give lip service to the documentary hypothesis, which is a very liberal scholarship idea, which we won't be going into. Refuting the documentary hypothesis is like lessons in and of itself. But so just keep in mind when you're reading that, he will give lip service to it. You'll see him talking about like E and J and P and D, and I just skim over those parts. If you're looking for a book to debunk that, Rethinking Genesis by Dwayne A. Garrett focuses on debunking the documentary hypothesis, among other things. So our objectives today is understand the purpose of the garden in Eden and man's role in creation, understand the fall and Satan's role in it, and then understand the rise of human civilization through historical parables, which is what I believe the first 11 chapters of Genesis is. They're historical stories but told in parable forms because it's, how Moses is getting around theological points about how we got to the state we are as a broken race. All right, so let's begin with a prayer. Father, thank you for this time to gather together and study your word, and let your scripture resonate in our hearts, and let us learn lessons from it, Lord. And let it help strengthen us in our Christian walk with you, Lord, and let our light shine out into the world. In your name, amen. All right. So, at the time of Yahweh God's making earth and heavens, this is why I'm using this translation, because he translates Yahweh. And I want you to just pay attention to Yahweh God, how many times it's used. And when no bush of the open country was in the earth yet, and no plant of the open country was growing yet, because Yahweh God had not made it rain on the earth, and there was no human being to serve the ground, That is why we are created. So that is something we should focus on, right? So we were created to serve this world, right? Though a stream was going up from the earth and watering the entire face of the ground, I believe this is the stream that flows out of Eden and branches into the 4 rivers. So God is the source of all water that, gives life to our world.
It's coming out of the earth to make the water.
It's coming out of the garden in Eden. Okay. That's what I believe that's talking about here. So Yahweh, God, shaped the human being with dirt from the ground and blew into its nostrils living breath. And the human being became a living person. So we're seeing here that God shaped us like a craftsman. This is an important thing to think about with God. He is a craftsman. He does his work. He makes things. He does it perfectly. He's the best craftsman. And he formed us out of the dirt, and he blew his breath into us, his spirit into us, and made us into animate beings, and that we have our own spirit, right? All right. There's something else to note, like dirt is seen as kind of a weak substance, like in Job 10 verse 9 and 34 verse 15, it kind of equals frailty or weakness. So we're made out of something that is frail. We are frail beings. We get hurt easily. We can die easily. So the human word in Hebrew for human in Hebrew is Adam, which that's also the name of our first man, right? And it's related to the word for dirt or soil, which is Adama. So you see, Adam comes from Adama, right? So human comes to us from Latin, humanus, and the Latin word for dirt or soil is humus. So they both have their same roots in that meaning. So human does mean of the earth too. So we still use the same concept to this day. So the earth, Adama, needs an earthling, Adam, to serve it. God did not create this world for us to live on. He created us to tend this world, is what Genesis tells us. So now we have this phrase, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh God. This phrase is used 19 times in Genesis 2 and 3 alone, and this is nearly half the usage in the First Testament. It's like, I'm kind of liking to call the Old Testament the First Testament to make it, it's not something that is old and we shouldn't care about, right? It's something we should care about. Ironically, the bulk of the rest of the usage is found in Chronicles, the last book in the Hebrew canon. So I'm sure the Chronicle writer had that in mind. Genesis 1 uses exclusively the generic word Elohim, while now Yahweh is being directly associated with the Elohim of Genesis 1, a statement that Yahweh is not just the tribal God of the Israelites, but he is the God of everything, right? So this is what Moses is teaching to the Israelites as he writes this book to give them their history. So Yahweh God planted a garden in lush, that's what Eden means, it just means lush, on the east, and put there the human being that he had shaped. Yahweh God made to grow up from the ground every tree that is desirable to look at and good for food, with the life tree in the middle of the garden and the good and bad knowledge tree. So these are very literal translations of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So humanity, I want to point out, is we're not made to be immortal originally. See, we are put in a place where we can access immortality, the tree of life. So we were outside the garden, and we're brought into the garden, into paradise. And paradise, by the way, just means garden in Persian. That's where the word comes to us from. There was a river going out of Lush to water the garden, and from there it would divide and become 4 headwaters. The name of the first was the Pison. It was the one going around the entire Havilah region where there is gold. The gold of that region is good. Ruby and emerald stone are there. The name of the second river was Gihon. It was the one going around the entire Cush region. The name of the third river was Hiddekel. It was going east of Asher. That's Assyria. The fourth river was the Parat. So where is the land of Eden or Lush located? So we know that a river flows out of Eden and becomes the 4 rivers, the Pishon, the Gihon, the Hiddekel, and the Parat. These are the Hebrew names for these rivers. They all have their sources in Eden. There are some people that are trying to harmonize the fact that none of these rivers presently have a source together, and so they try to say that what it says is that Eden is where the rivers come together, but the Hebrew does seem to imply it's the source. So they all have their source in Eden. They all either flow through or around the lands mentioned in them. I've seen it translated different ways as flowing through or flowing around. So the Pishon, which means like a rusher, flows through the lands of Havilah, which is only mentioned again in 1 Samuel 15, verses 7 through 9. And it's a place where Saul fought the Amalekites. It seems to be in northern Arabia. Some argue that this river is present-day Wadi al-Batin, a massive dry river that once flowed through Saudi Arabia, whose source is in the Hijaz Mountains, which is a place rich in gold, like Havilah is mentioned. So there's a lot of gold mining to this day in these mountains. The Gihon, which means gusher, is said to flow through the land of Cush. Some believe this is the Nile. The Hebrew word for Nile is either Shihor, which means black, and it's used there in Jeremiah, or Yeor, which is used again in Genesis 41:1, and actually a bunch of times in the Joseph narrative, and that just means river. However, the Gihon Springs is the name of the source of Jerusalem's water, and that might be a coincidence because, again, it just means gusher. But it's interesting that one of the 4 rivers is, the source of water for Jerusalem. I'm not exactly sure what to make of that, but I just want to point that out. So The Tigris flows around the lands of Assyria, where its headwaters are found. The Hiddekel is just the Hebrew word for the Tigris. The Euphrates lands are not mentioned, but it flows parallel to the Tigris and goes through Babylon. Parad is just the sort of Hebrew words for Euphrates. So I think where Eden lies really didn't matter to Moses. I don't think we should be spending a lot of time trying to figure out where it is, because there is no place where these four rivers have the same source. Like, it's the lands of Cush are south of Egypt, right? Saudi Arabia is south of Mesopotamia. These are impossible to harmonize. So some people believe, the world really changed after the flood, and that before the flood they could have had the same source. But again, that means we still can't find this place to this day because the world would have changed too much. What matters is what the garden of God represents that matters. Yes?
Do you believe that, James?
I do. I used to try to go with the thought that the Garden of Eden is beneath the Persian Gulf, and that the flood was the Persian Gulf being flooded. And honestly, studying it more, I think it's impossible to hold that view and understand what Genesis is telling us. Okay. So the Garden of God is the place where heaven meets earth. It's where God is able to come to us. It's his sort of first temple here on the earth. So I think it's on top of a mountain. And I know Genesis doesn't say it's on top of a mountain, but we see this first, that all the waters that give life to the world spring from the garden. And this made me think of Ezekiel's vision in chapter 47 of the new temple, on the Temple Mount, where a river springs from the eastern gate of the temple to spread life to the world, even to the Dead Sea. So I think Ezekiel is talking about like the garden. So this is why I think Eden is representative of the cosmic mountain. So we see in the ancient Near East, gods were seen to live on mountains. They are tall, remote, the tallest are inhospitable. Moses receives the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai from God. God sits on the mountain. The temple is built on Mount Moriah. The transfiguration takes place on a great mountain. Jesus prays atop mountains several times, including the Mount of Olives. Psalms and the prophets speak of God atop mountains. This is why pagans worship on high places, why the Egyptians built pyramids and the Mesopotamians built ziggurats. Even in Mesoamerica, we find pyramids were built to worship the gods and give sacrifices to them because they're reaching to the heavens. The Tower of Babel is an artificial high place, right? And we see two more sacred mountains in Genesis that are both important to the plan of redemption. Mount Ararat, where Noah's ark comes to rest, and Mount Moriah, where the binding of Isaac takes place. So we see Adam is made outside the garden of God, but then he is brought to the top of the mountain and ushered into the Holy of Holies, as you were, of the temple that is built on our planet or universe that God created during the first week, right? The first week was spent building this world. And now he has built this garden. He's brought man to serve in the garden. So like Isaiah 2:2 says, it will come about in the last days that the mountain that is the Lord's temple will be established. All right. Or Micah 4:1, but in the last days it will come about that the temple mount of the Lord will be firmly set as the leading mountain. Psalms 121, I lift up my eyes toward the mountain. From where will my help come? My help is from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. Like 2 Peter 1:18, we ourselves heard the voice that came from the heaven when we were with him, Jesus, on the holy mountain. He's talking about the transfiguration here, when they're up on that mountain. And we see in Revelations 21:10, where John writes that he carried me away in the spirit to a large high mountain and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven as it's coming down to sit on this mountain where John is. Hebrews 12:22, instead you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, to the heavenly Jerusalem, to tens of thousands of angels joyfully gathered together. So Jerusalem on a mountain, this is the holy Jerusalem up in heaven, right? So Ezekiel 20:40, for on my holy mountain, on Israel's high mountains, declares the Lord. So this is where he likes to be. This is what we see. So I think Eden is on a mountain. The river flows down, like rivers flow downhill, so it flows down a mountain and out into the world. So Yahweh God got the human being and set him down in lush garden to serve it and keep it. And that word keep in the Hebrew is It's like protection. It's a guarding verb, right? The word is samar, and it's used in Numbers 3, verses 7 through 8 to talk about the priest's responsibility to guard the tabernacle. And I have here a verse of it from Targum Neophiti. And the Lord God took Adam and had him dwell in the Garden of Eden to toil in the law and to observe its commandments. I put this here just because you've ever heard anyone argue that Genesis was written post-exile. This is how Jews thought post-exile. Right? So this is pre-Christian Judaism here from the Targum. And so we don't see any mention of the law in Genesis, but the Targums add the law in all over the place. Yahweh God ordered the human being, from every tree in the garden you may definitely eat, but from the good and bad knowledge tree you will not eat, because at that time you eat from it, you will definitely die. And that's like an immediate death in the Hebrew. That's not, you're going to die one day. The Hebrew makes it sound like you eat it, you're dead. So keep that in mind. But Yahweh God said, it's not good for the human being to be on his own. I'll make him help equivalent to him. So Yahweh God shaped from the ground every creature of the open country and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the human being to see what he would call it. Whatever the human being called a living being, it became its name. And name is very important to the Hebrews, right? One of their names for God is Hashem, the name. And so when you name something, you have authority over it, right? So God named us when he called us human beings. He called us Adam. And that puts authority over him. But then Adam names all the animals, putting them under his authority. So the human being gave names to all the animals, to the birds of the heaven, and to all the creatures of the open country. But for the human being, he didn't find help equivalent to him, right? You can have all the pets in the world, but is it really going to fill that hole in your heart that you need for companionship? Some people maybe, but I don't know. So, that's a slide that shouldn't be there. So Yahweh God made a coma fall on the human being, so he slept. He got out, he got one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And Yahweh God built the rib that he got from the human being into a woman and brought her to the human being. The human being said, this one finally is bone from my bones, flesh from my flesh. This one will be called woman, because from a man this one got. So we shouldn't think that Adam is naming her in the same way as the animals, to think that he has authority over the woman. She is there to be his equivalent, to be his equal. In fact, I think that's why she's made the way she is. So that's why a man abandons his father and his mother and attaches himself to his woman, and they become one flesh. Which is not actually necessarily a sexual meaning. It means that they become a new family, a new family unit separate from their parents. And that the abandoned word there means that you don't have responsibilities necessarily to that point, right? Yes, Stan?
The word attaches is a very interesting translation because the two different copies of the Old Testament, Masoretic and Septuagint copies, put different words here. Jesus reasons for the one in the Septuagint is passive here. He is joined. He is attached to. That passive means somebody else did it too.
Okay.
The only other person is God. That's the reasoning by which Jesus produces the understanding that what God has joined together, man is not to take apart.
Okay.
He's reasoning out of the Septuagint and making that word something that is done to Adam rather than something that Adam did.
All right. So Dan was saying that in the Septuagint, the Greek word there is a little different for attached than it is in the Hebrew, and that it implies that someone is attaching Adam and Eve together, and of course, that would be God, and that's why Jesus uses the Septuagint when he quotes there, and why he says, what God has joined, don't let man divide. The Hebrew word that we see here in Genesis, dabak, it refers to God's relationship with Israel, how he attaches himself to Israel. And the word that he has for abandon there, arab, that's the word that is used when God when Israel abandons God, when they disobey him, the prophets say that you're, Arab, you're abandoning him, you're abandoning your responsibility to him. So the two were naked, the man and his woman, but they felt no shame. And in the Hebrew Bible, naked is usually someone's like poor or they're being shamed. It's not like anything sexual there. So they have nothing is kind of what it's saying by being naked, but they don't care because they're in God's garden. He's taking care of them. That's what we should get out of that. So, why did God make woman from Adam's side? I know, I haven't been asking questions lately, but anyone?
He must have wanted,
God can do whatever he wants, that's true.
I was going to say, he must have wanted man or woman to come from a part of the man.
Yes, he must have wanted the woman to come from part of the man. And I'm sorry, I could not hear what you said.
This is the story that came down, and
Yeah?
it makes sense.
Okay.
Of course, lots of people could have other ideas on how God could do it, just like how the river's formed and our current knowledge of geography. But again, it's important to understand God made the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
God made these rivers. God made the animals. And God wanted man to realize the only companion he could receive was woman.
That's true. God wanted Adam to understand that woman is his only companion. Leanne?
The visual I see is a partnership. One standing by each other on side by side, not the woman not having authority over the man, but standing with him.
Yeah.
And having his back and working side by side with him.
Yes, that's true. I think it was God is anticipating male sexism and showing that woman is sort of half of him, that we're divided. Because one way to read the Hebrew, because the word rib, it's kind of a really hard word to translate, but one way to look at it is God almost divided Adam in half and then made Eve from the other half, as if they are equal. So that is one way to look at it, and I think that is what it is. Because remember, Genesis told us in chapter 1 that he made them in the image of God, both man and woman. And that's a very big theological statement to make in the world where only kings were even seen made in the image of God, let alone peasants, let alone women. And I'm just going to give you, here's some examples of sort of Hebrew and Gentile thoughts on women. So Targum Neophiti reads, "And the memory of the Lord created the man in his own likeness. In the likeness from before the Lord he created him. Male and his partner he created them." It replaced woman with partner. So I just thought that was interesting. But here's some Greek ideas. Hesiod, he gives us a lot of their mythology. So Zeus, who thunders on high, made woman to be evil to mortal men, with nature to do evil. Wow. Yeah. Or here we got it from his works today, is the man who trusts womankind trusts deceivers. He's the guy who gives us the Pandora box story, by the way, where woman's responsible for all the evils in the world because of her curiosity, right? So I think Genesis is really trying to hammer home that we shouldn't be looking down on women. Men shouldn't be looking down on women. And, well, he knows we're going to, sadly, because we're fallen creatures. So, show of hands, who thinks the snake in the garden is only a snake? Oh, did you have a comment? Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand.
I'm assuming it's using the word equal loosely, because we can each other, but we are not equal.
That's fair.
If we were equal, I could have kids.
That's fair. We're there to complement each other. I mean equal in that one is not better than the other, is perhaps how I should have phrased that. Okay. Anyway, show of hands, who thinks the snake in the garden is only a snake? Oh, we have one. Okay. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, ma'am. Yes. Yeah. So this is what the International Standard Version reads for Genesis 3:1. And instead of using snake, they translated it as shining one. Now the shining one was more clever than any animal to fill that the Lord God made. That's an interesting translation. I've never seen any other translation of the Bible that uses it that way. The shining one. This is a statement of a divine being. And this is, I'm going to explain how they kind of came to this translation. So, the word in Genesis 3 that we saw in that last translation translated as shining one, but it actually is just snake, right? Nakash. It's the less common word for Hebrew for snake. There's a more common one that's used in other places. It comes from the root nchsh, which means serpent, but as a verb it means to use divinations or to give omens. And as an adjective it means something that's bronze or brazen. So it's sort of a triple wordplay because Satan is sort of a divine throne guardian, kind of like a seraph, who gives information from the divine realm to Eve, right? Divination. He sort of has a shining appearance, which are associated with supernatural beings throughout the Old Testament, which is where the brazen or bronze meaning would come in. So Moses is using serpent to both denigrate Satan, because a snake is a lowly creature, right? But also because of the wordplay involved with what the flexibility of the root has in Hebrew. So the word seraph, I bring this up because the word seraph comes from the Hebrew word saraf, to burn or incinerate or destroy. And I put every use, but I think it's almost every use in the Old Testament. It refers to serpents, often winged. So seraphim are supernatural winged serpentine beings who carry out God's will and guard his throne like cherubims do. So in Numbers 21, 6 through 8 and verse 9, then the Lord sent fiery serpents, and literally in the Hebrew that is ha-seraphim ha-nakashim, so the seraphim serpents, among the people, and they bit the people, so that many people of Israel died. And the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. But then Moses makes a bronze serpent, and that's what it says in the text, a bronze serpent sets it on a pole. So he couldn't quite make a fiery serpent, right? He had to make it out of bronze. But we see in Isaiah 14:12 this word halal ben shahar. It talks about this word. It's a title for Satan. It's where we get the Latin word Lucifer comes from. It means morning star or day star, son of the dawn. And Isaiah writes that he is shiny like a bright star, and he has cast down for the pride in his heart. And then in Ezekiel 28, we have explicitly a cherub, which is another type of throne guardian we see that's often associated with God's throne and guarding things. And he is in Eden. That's what Ezekiel says. The cherub is in Eden. He's covered in precious gems like scales. The cherub is blameless, walking in the garden at God's direction to guard it. But one day, the cherub is filled with violence because, as it says in verse 17, your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor, and he's cast down to the earth like the serpent. And then lastly, Revelations 12:9, the great dragon is called the ancient serpent and cast down with his angels. And the ancient serpent is a reference, of course, to Genesis 3. So this is why the ISV translators chose to translate serpent as shining one, to give the implication that it is a supernatural being and not just a snake.
So God made, I consider the serpent Satan. Oh, God.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, I believe that the devil was already before Adam and Eve.
He was what before Adam and Eve?
Before, yes.
Yeah, he existed before Adam, of course, yes.
You know, it was activated.
Activated?
Activated to be evil and start evil once they touch that tree. They didn't touch that tree. You know?
Are you saying Satan wasn't evil until he touched the tree?
Well, when Eve
Okay, Eve.
jumped it out,
Okay.
you know, it's that they activated because they couldn't live without sin if they touched that tree.
Okay, yeah, okay.
The devil was,
Yeah, you're talking about even Adam eating the fruit. That's where, yeah. Okay.
but if they never touched that tree, we could live without evil.
That's right. If
It was already here.
yeah, humans wouldn't have sin enter us, but you're right. Satan had already sinned because that's what he's doing by tempting Eve. Anyways, this is the King Hezekiah's seal we found. And that creature in the center is a seraphim with wings, and it's kind of got a little serpent-like head. So just to throw out like how the Hebrews they put these seraphim on royal seals because it's to protect the king. So just to sort of give this idea of how the Hebrews saw seraphs. Plus it's really cool because that is actual King Hezekiah's seal. We found that. Yeah.
I can see some confusion using morning star since it's described Satan and it's describing Christ.
It says
That just means that it's a divine being?
so stars are used for divine being, and the morning star is the brightest of all stars. And so it's more to give an idea of how Satan sees himself.
Okay.
Right? So Jesus is like the proper morning star, and Satan is the usurping morning star.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Satan was also, God Christie was the most beautiful angel that he made.
Yes, that is what Ezekiel says. Yeah. He was absolutely, yeah. Yep, he was put in the garden. So this is why Eve trusted the snake. He was there in the garden. There's probably lots of supernatural beings in the garden too. And so for Eve, this was just another one of them. Right?
So God changed him into a snake.
The snake is like a metaphor to be insulting to him.
Okay.
So now the snake was shrewder than any creature of the open country that Yahweh God had made. It said to the woman, God really said, you will not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the snake, we may eat from the fruit of the trees in the garden, but from the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, God said, you will not eat from it, and you will not touch it, so that you don't die. Now, God never said anything about touching the tree. He just told Adam not to eat from it. So Eve has added something here. And then the snake said to the woman, you will not definitely die. Rather, he knows, God does, that at the time you eat from it, your eyes will open, and you'll become like God, knowing good and bad. So
It's not a physical death, it's a spiritual or emotional death.
true, and now my slider is not working. Yep, there it goes. Okay. Yeah, well, the Hebrew text implies it should be a physical death, and it doesn't end up being a physical death. But anyways, this is the lie that Satan tells. He mischaracterizes God's reasons to deny the fruit. Not that it would be bad for Eve to eat from it, but that God is denying secret knowledge from humans. That is the lie that the snake tells us, right? That we're being denied something that we deserve. And why is Satan doing this? Pride. This is my thoughts here. Please feel free to disagree with me. I think Satan thinks of himself as this amazing being. He's beautiful, right? He's covered in gems, as it says in Ezekiel. And God creates these two humans. I think Satan wants to show God that he's wasting his time with us. After all, Satan exists. What do you need these humans for? He's this magnificent and beautiful being. I think Satan expected to be rewarded for showing God his humans were flawed, that they would disobey him, that God would kill them, and things would go back to the way they should be. Instead, he's cursed. He's the one that really gets in trouble here.
That would make a good book.
Yeah.
So there's an implication that Satan is jealous of Adam and Eve.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because it says in Ezekiel that his pride turned into violence in his heart. Right? Yeah.
Do you think that if there was another human being, Satan would use another human being? Satan, the serpent is not Satan, the serpent.
I think the serpent, no. Well,
Devil got into the serpent.
there is that view that the serpent, that Satan just possessed a snake in the garden. But I think just the way the Hebrew wordplay is, and that we see other passages, that it was more like a serpentine-like supernatural being that was in the garden. And he's being insulted by just being called a mere snake. So the woman saw that the tree was good to eat, and that it was an object of longing to the eyes, and the tree was desirable for conveying wisdom, right? Right? We want what is good and desirable, and that often leads us to, sin, because we can't just trust our desires, right? We desire good things so much that we do bad things to get them. And so she got some of its fruit and ate, and also gave some to her man with her, and he ate. That parentheses is from my notes. I wasn't supposed to include them up here. It's just a little reminder for me. The Latin Vulgate removes the with her from that sentence. So it said, and gave some to her man, and it removes the with her as if Adam wasn't standing there the entire time this happened.
I think he was right there.
Yeah, he was right there.
Yeah.
And the Latin Vulgate removes that for some reason. But you see, Adam was told to keep the garden, right? To protect the garden. He just failed to protect the garden, right? So the eyes of the two of them opened, and they knew that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. Some people think the fig leaves would be from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Maybe, maybe not. Fig leaves are really big leaves, so that's why they would make good clothing, though. They heard the sound of Yahweh God walking about in the garden toward the breezy time of day, as if this is just something God does normally. Like he just comes through his garden at the nice time of the day, right? So this would be like the afternoon when the breeze is coming through. So the man and his woman hid from the face of Yahweh God among the trees in the garden. Who hasn't been a child and know you're in trouble? You're like your parents are home and you're going to get in trouble, so you try to hide from them, right? It's not really going to work, but you just do it. And then Yahweh God called to the man and said, "Where are you?" So I just want to do some alternate readings of Genesis 3, verse 8. So in the King James Version it says, "And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking," which I think is a very interesting translation. The ISV also uses this translation, "the voice of the Lord God was walking," as if this is a separate part of God that's walking, in the garden. And then the Targum Neophiti talks about the memra of the Lord. And as we talked last week, the memra means the word of the Lord. So I think this might be Jesus walking in the garden. Don't hold me to it, but I think this might be like the first appearance of Jesus, but I might be out on a limb there. He, the man, said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he, this is God, said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I ordered you not to eat from?" So it's interesting God is asking him this question. Anyone have any ideas why God would ask this question? I mean, he's God. He should know. Yes, Dan?
There are times in raising our kids where I know what the answer is, but I express it as a question.
Yeah.
I would often put my hand on my forehead and go, "Have you eaten from the tree?"
You're right.
Yeah, I know what the answer is, but I've got to get the kid to say that. The truth has got to come out of the kid's mouth in order for them to progress and get more mature.
That's right. I think this is like God is, he's the parent. He's looking down. He's like, "Hey, what have you been doing?" He's wanting you to tell the truth. But as we see, we don't quite get the truth from them. But he's giving them the chance, right? So the first thing Adam does is blame his wife, right? The man said, "The woman you put with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree and I ate it," as if I didn't know what fruit this tree came from. I don't know, she gave me this piece of fruit, I ate it. And Yahweh God said to the woman, "What is it that you've done?" And the woman said, "The snake, it deceived me and I ate."
That's why I thought it was actual, because of that statement.
What was actual?
Actual snake.
Well, again, the snake, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay.
The snake, Satan,
Yeah.
this being that's in the garden,
Yeah.
it deceived me. I would say Eve let herself be deceived. So, Yahweh God said to the snake, "Because you've done this, you're cursed more than every animal and more than every creature of the open country. On your stomach you'll go, and dirt you'll eat all the days of your life." So any verse you see about Satan being cast down to the earth, this is when it happens, when he's cursed right here. And enmity will be set in place between you and the woman, and between your offsprings and her offsprings. He'll strike you on the head, and you'll strike him on the heel. So this is our first messianic prophecy in the Old Testament, right? We all know this is referring to Christ when he is victorious. And notice, right, the snake's going to get his head crushed, kills the snake, but he'll also strike him, and it's a poisonous snake. So that implies that this person is also going to die. And yeah, because the snake's venom kills him. But our Messiah doesn't stay dead.
So, going back to the question you asked, do we believe that the snake was just a snake? And yet we saw that Satan entered the snake and tempted Eve and Adam, and now God is pronouncing this curse on the snake. Now, I can understand what happened to the snakes as they crawl around without legs, but is that a curse on Satan or a curse on the snake?
This is a curse on Satan. Snakes just crawl around. That's just how they were made. There's nothing wrong with crawling on the ground. In the creation days, God mentions creating crawling things. Yeah, so this is just Satan being cursed. He's going to be on his belly for the rest of his life, and he's going to eat dirt all the days of his life. And enmity will be between him and the woman's and their offspring, right? You know, this is not that snakes are our mortal enemies and we should go out and kill every snake. Because again, God made them. Snakes are good, even if you find them icky.
When we see the snake, without legs, coming down the curse, but it will be a spiritual thing,
Okay. Yeah, so you think that seeing a snake crawling on the ground is just a reminder of what happened to Satan? Okay. Yeah, okay.
but it's a spiritual thing.
Yeah, it's a spiritual curse, yeah. To the woman he said, I will make very great your pain in connection with pregnancy. In painfulness you will give birth to children. I should point out the connection with pregnancy. So the entire ordeal of pregnancy is what's made worse for women, not just the delivery, which is made more painful. Toward man will be your desire, but he will rule over you. Oh, right. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, there's a lot of debate on exactly what this means. Is this just sort of desire for the husband, like a sexual desire, and you'll be forever at his mercy? Is it the shifting in dynamics of no longer quite equal? So there's quite of a lot of debate. Or is it about how sin has kind of damaged the relationship between men and women? Is another idea to look at that. So the husband and wife relationship is no longer the perfect thing it was meant to be in the garden, and that because sin has entered the world, it has been broken slightly. Yeah.
So consider this translation, and when it says that toward your man will be your desires, but he will rule over you. So was this command was given after, or was this just a statement?
This is a curse on the woman, that God's saying your desire will be towards your man, your husband, but he will rule over you. So maybe this is just establishing what's called sort of federal headship, where the man is the head of the family. Might just be what this verse is saying. And that he went from being perfect equals to slightly change in the dynamic. To Adam he said, because you listened to the voice of your woman and ate from the tree that I ordered you, you will not eat from it. The ground is cursed because of you. In pain you will eat from it all the days of your life. Thorn and thistle it will grow for you, but you will eat the plants of the open country. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread until you go back to the ground, because you were gotten from it, because you were dirt, and you will go back to dirt. So Adam was created to work in the garden, right? And it would have been a joyful thing. You would have enjoyed working. I think this is a preview for what the new creation is going to be like. We're going to work, but it's not going to tire you. It's not going to be a burden on you. It is now because of what Adam's done. And the ground itself is cursed, right? So the world itself is broken by what Adam's done, yes.
One especially good thing about this translation is that
Okay.
Because of the special valuable thing in this translation.
Yeah, so it's like both are sort of separate domains, where childbearing is, of course, only for women, and she's going to have more pain with it. And at the time, it was accepted that the man would go out and do the hard work in the field, and his labor is going to be more painful because of it. So yes, we're both cursed basically in our purpose to suffer more. And then, of course, we won't get to live forever any longer because we're denied the tree. So that's why we go back to the dirt. So, the man named his woman Hava. That is the Hebrew word for Eve. I haven't actually looked into how we got Eve, but because she becomes the mother of every living person. So, she is sort of the spring of life, right? That's why she's called Mother, Eve. And Yahweh God made for Adam and his woman leather coats and clothed them. So we have our first animal sacrifice here. God has killed at least one animal, probably more, to make leather clothing. And of course, being gifted clothing in the First Testament is a sign of honor. Right? You give someone clothes, you're honoring them. It's a very interesting thing to see here. He could have just let them be in their fig leaves, right? But no, he's taking care of them, even after what they've done. But Yahweh God said, here the man has become like one of us in knowing good and bad. So we're back to that plural that we saw in the creation of man. So now that he can't put out his hand and also get from the life tree and eat and live through the ages, so Yahweh God sent him off from lush garden to serve the ground from which he was made. And Yahweh God drove the man out and made the sphinxes. That's literally what the word cherubim means. It means sphinx. To dwell on the east of lush garden with sword-like flames whirling to keep the way to the life tree. So we are now barred forever from entering Eden until the new creation, right? We are kept out of paradise because of what our ancestors did. So I call this the proto-evangelium, this section here. Has anyone ever heard that term before? It means the pre-good news, right? The pre-gospel. And it's because of this. If God decreed that they will surely die for eating the fruit, why didn't he not just kill Adam and Eve and start over?
They had to learn to repent, and they had to learn to confess. Because they would never confess. They blamed each other for a mistake.
Okay. Yeah, he said that because they never repented, they never confessed. They just blamed each other, blamed the snake. They didn't take responsibility for what they did. Yes?
Didn't God foreknow that we were not going to live in the Garden of Eden forever? Didn't he take into account our sins?
So God had a plan for redemption before he created this universe, which implies that perhaps something had already gone wrong with the supernatural beings he created. It really depends on how you view God's sovereignty. If he knew it would happen, or if he knew it was a possibility it would happen, or a certainty. That's a whole theological debate. But I want to focus on why God didn't just kill Adam and Eve and start over. Why he clothed them with animals. Why he made a sacrifice for them. Yes.
Well, apparently, the relationship between Adam and Eve died because they did not have that closeness that they had before the fall. And because of that behavior that they had, and that we continue to repeat, we have a dead relationship with God until we take the sacrifice of Jesus Christ as our Savior.
Yeah, this is the gospel. This is why it's called the proto-evangelium. This is the gospel. God gives them grace. He spares them and even makes a sacrifice for them.
I think he did it because he loves us.
That's true. He does love us. So he said, you will die, and then he did not kill us but gave us mercy. And he does the same thing with Cain, as we're going to see. And we kind of got to move on. We're running out of time. So anyways, this is why it's called the proto-evangelium, because God gives Adam and Eve grace instead of justice. He sacrificed at least one animal, so there is bloodshed as part of their redemption. And while they lost access to eternal life, he makes a promise that one day the serpent will be defeated and there will be hope of being restored to the garden. So Genesis 4 in brief, Adam lay with his wife Eve and she gave birth to Cain. And she says, because I've generated someone with Yahweh. So God is involved in bringing this first new human life into this world. It's possible Eve saw Cain as the promised seed. We'll see this also with Noah and what his name means. Then she and Adam also have Abel, which is the Hebrew word habal, which kind of means wind and sort of becomes the meaning for vanity or meaninglessness, like in Ecclesiastes. So then Cain is a farmer, and he offers some fruit of the ground, while Abel is a shepherd and offers some fruit of the firstborn flock, some of the fat parts. So he's following the Levitical code of giving the importance of first fruits and firstborn, and the fatty portions are the best part. So Abel is offering his best. Cain, it appears, is not. And then Cain, the firstborn human, can't handle that he was rejected, and he murders someone. So first human born is a murderer. So we're off to a great start as a human race. So this is like another garden, though. So there's an orchard where Cain's fruit came from, and it has witnessed another sin. And once more, God asks what has happened as if he doesn't know. And once more, Cain lies about his sin. And this crime demands punishment. Human blood has been shed, as we'll see in Genesis 9, that, man sheds blood, by man shall he be killed, right? So yet Cain is given grace by God. He's just cast out farther to the east, becomes a wanderer, a fugitive. He's banished east to the lands of drifting. A lot of translations will say Nod just means drifting. He's also worried about being killed himself, so God promised that whoever kills him, vengeance will be taken on him sevenfold. Who Cain is worried will kill him, or much like Cain's wife, Genesis really doesn't answer this question. It's not something Moses cared about, right? Then we are given Cain's line of descent. He had a son with his wife named Enoch. They named the city built after him. This is the first ever city built. Enoch had Irad, who fathered Mehujael, and on until we get to Lamech. We learn more of Lamech. He is the first polygamist in the Bible. He is married to Ada and Zillah, and he's a violent man who just murdered someone. Jewish tradition says that's Cain for striking him, and he declares that anyone he kills will suffer 77-fold. Then he has 3 sons and a daughter named Naamah. And then it returns to Adam and Eve. They have a son named Seth because God has given her a new son to replace Abel. And Seth has a son named Enosh. And at that time, beginning was made of calling out with the name of Yahweh. So worship is beginning now. Yahweh is no longer walking around with us. Now we're calling out to him. We're praying to him. All right, so why is Naamah's daughter, Lamech, mentioned? The Jews thought she was Noah's wife. And then we get Genesis 5 in brief. This is the book of generations of Adam. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created and blessed them and named them man when they were created. And what follows is his descent. Unlike Cain's line, this one is marked by years. We don't really have time to get into what all the years mean. I will say there's a connection between the two Lamechs. Lamech from Seth's line lived 777 years, and Lamech from Cain's line has the 77-fold. They're both of the second and last generations of their lines before the flood. So I think there's something there. Anyway, so when Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. So as if this is the promised seed that Eve was promised. And, well, we are out of time. So that was just a quote from Revelation to end things off, but we're out of time. So thank you all for your patience with me.
So we'll be talking about Genesis.
We'll be talking about Genesis 6 through 9, the flood.